Welcome back to the Sound Foundations for Parenting podcast. I'm Brian Powers. And in today's episode, Darren is back with Gayle Moyers, a good friend of ours, expert when it comes to learning, education, parenting. And they're really, the two of them are get into a lot of ideas about being in the moment, being present to your child, a lot of things that we may not think about in the daily craziness of parenting. It's difficult. It's not easy to really to think of some of the things that they bring up, and some of the things that resonated to me when I listened to the interview and Darren and Gayle going back and forth is, how many times in a day, and I think about this with my own 3 children, am I authentic and positive comments versus criticism? And I'm not saying like, do we keep score, but, being authentic with positive comments instead of, constantly criticizing, it's tough. It really is tough. And Gayle makes a statement and says, believing and showing your child, everybody, believes in their child, but how many times a day do we tell them that? I believe in you, and that, we have to start or trigger that internal dialogue, inside our child, and really, one of the things, and not to beat ourselves up as much, and being able to say our best is good enough, and to learn from mistakes, and the conversation that Darren has with Gayle is just, it's gold. It just kind of spits off a ton of really good nuggets that help in focusing on that everyday positive conversation we should be having with our children. Where are we, and have we set goals for parenting? I mean, everybody can get better. Everybody can learn from their mistakes. And, Gayle brings up a good point. We want to get better in being parents. I mean, I definitely agree with that, but have we set goals to kind of see where, almost like metrics, or how are we going to measure how far we've come? If we're going to work on this, let's say, what's our goal, and how are we going to get there, and what does that look like? So when we come back after the intro music, we'll go right into the conversation and interview with Darren and Gayle Moyers. So stay tuned for that.
Let's face it, parenting is the most important job on earth. Every day presents a stack of different challenges, and more often than not, the answer is outside of the box. On this podcast, we will offer proven strategies, interview pioneers in education, give insights into how to be successful parents, and even share our imperfect experiences of being parents ourselves. We're all in on this journey, and we will span the globe to find out what is working and who has the answers. This is the Sound Foundations for Parenting podcast. Here are your hosts, Darren McCarthy and Brian Powers.
They all want to make a difference, but they've talked themselves into the fact that they can't. So we have the problem of making their thinking, let's put their thinking in order. And
yes, and that's what I wanted to talk about tonight.
Okay. And I still like the idea of, you can make a difference, or you want to make a difference, but you don't know how or why. And so they're just some very simple truths. And what message are we giving our children when it's constant criticism? Can you count how many times in a day you give a very authentic, positive response? Like, I really like the way you said thank you. I appreciate that.
Well, in a non-condescending way.
Right. What you want you want your voice and your living and your food, your food, your thoughts, your expressions to your children, to overwhelm them with, I believe in you. And at this point, we could give the story about a mother who had a son in third grade, and he wasn't reading yet. And she was so overwhelmed that she didn't want to worry about it. So she simply said to him, don't worry, sweetie, it'll get easier. That's all she said over and over and over again. And doggone, it turned out this kid had over 140 IQ, and he's the star of the family today.
And that language becomes the internal language, internal dialogue.
And the question, it's all about questions. What are we asking ourselves? So am I doing the best? And actually, we come back to my favorite quote, our best is good enough. Your kids will get up older and criticize you, but when you know you did your best, that's good enough. And until you can believe that, the kids are going to get you in guilt. They'll use it.
It's funny because, it's funny. So I just put all this sod in my yard, right? So I put about, 2,000 square feet of brand new sod.
Wow.
And then, how you say, dogs do what dogs do. So now we've got these 4 or 5 huge patches of brown spots, right? And so I pull into the driveway, and what do I see, right? I don't see the, 1,800 square feet of sod. I see the 4 patches of brown spots. And I think that's the same thing that we see when we see our kids. We don't see the whole child. We don't see how they interact and how they play and how their language and all these other things. We just see he's not behaving well, or he's not doing what I'm asking to do, or she's not, eating right. And, you kind of I think you have a tendency to kind of hone in on the things on the brown spots.
Yeah. And it has to be with the heart of the parent. When we get our heart in the right place, we'll know how to do the right thing. We'll have the intuition. Only if we can self-monitor, self-assess. And that's where I think sometimes a questionnaire, if you open up the thinking and make a questionnaire available, and then you do the next call, they've done this questionnaire. And it's really, what are your strengths? How many times a day do you think you give a positive comment to your child that's authentic versus criticism? Are you hearing more critical statements or more complimentary statements? And really, you remember Nick. He came into that center literally a curmudgeon. And the rule was, your best is good enough, and we must always show respect. I just didn't let him decide what respect was. I said, I'll be the king of that one. And in 3 weeks, reading scores went up 3 years. Spelling went up 1 year in 3 weeks. And it's in the book. It's in the Learning Heirs book, his story. But we have to make it simple and something that, like you said, you have to take an assessment on yourself, but they don't know what questions to ask. I think that's the key to the whole thing.
Well, you step back, right? So there's a scenario now, and you probably don't witness this too much, but like on Facebook, for example, or any social media really,
you can create what looks like the absolute ideal, life. It's kind of like what they used to do with models, where they, everybody looks skinny, everybody's fantastic, and so you can literally create this life that's idyllic, and it's not real. And you get so many, you get all this feedback, and there's so many likes, and I love it, and there's all this kind of surreal, not realistic stuff. So I think
it's
fake.
It's fake.
In time you start to believe it. It's like, oh, I have 4,000 likes on this picture of my beautiful baby, baby boy, and the truth of the matter is he hasn't slept well or had eaten well or some of those basic principles. And that's why I was talking about being true. So like, that's just, if you want a complete child, you got to be real about what you're dealing with.
And it gets ugly. And I've heard you have conversations with parents where it kind of gets ugly, right?
Oh yeah. And the problem that we are confronted with is if the parent isn't listening, then there's no message to relate. If the parent's on the defense, there's not going to be any intake. So it's kind of a combination between, like, we want the person to be authentic, but that isn't our job. It's their job to find their authenticity. It's our job to give them the space and the encouragement to do it, and the love.
Well, but you go back, you said you had a good point there. You said you go and you do an assessment, right? So a lot of the assessments that we use, like the listening questionnaire, is 0 to 5. Mm-hmm. It's subjective. So
right.
It's interesting because if you don't if you're not true on that actual initial assessment, you won't see the challenge and you won't address it, and it'll always kind of be present.
I challenge that with this. On that assessment, and particularly on going through an assessment which was created to teach them about all the areas that better listening could affect. Before I talk about listening versus hearing, I want them to look at a listening and language questionnaire, which will get them to see the listening is heart before you get to the head. It's being receptive, being willing to be open, that kind of thing. But when they do the key to this whole thing is that parent summary page, which requires goals. And so as a parent, if you're on this seminar because you want to be a better parent, do you know what your goals are for your children? Well, I want them to be happy. I want them to go to college. Well, why would you want that now? It's not relevant now. Mm-hmm. That's saying it's up to me to get my kid to college versus I trust my child to find their way.
But there's also that's where language ties in, right? So
absolutely.
There's your own perception, and then if you're actually really listening to your kids,
maybe they don't want to be on the travel soccer team, and playing 50 sports, every day. And maybe they would rather be reading a book, or I see a lot of scenarios where it's kind of like the parent is pulling their own dream out of their kid, and it might not fit. I got a perfect scenario. It's like when I was a kid, I played basketball probably, 8 to 10 hours a day.
Wow.
My son would rather read a book, and he'd rather learn how to do coding, and rather do more. He likes to play, and maybe one day he'll enjoy that. But there's so much pressure on kids today to
it almost looks like they're lining them up for a college scholarship when they're like 6 or 7 years old.
Well, and that's one of my strong criticism of today's education. They're never in the moment. They're always getting ready for the next part. So you're sending them to preschool so they can be ready for school. You're sending them to school to get ready for college. You're sending them to college to get ready for work. But they're not learning along the way there that it's up to them and they can do it. And of course, more and more today, we're finding children that haven't learned the work ethic, haven't learned responsibility, that mom has to do everything for them because mom wants to make sure it's done right, kind of thing. And so, as Brian's reporting from the authentic work world, I can't hire people that can think. It's all been done for them. The schools give you the test questions, you memorize them and take a test. But
so
they don't.
When it comes to, if you're talking to a parent and today is day one, and I'm totally Piscean about this. Today I want to be a new parent and a great parent, and tired of some of my bad habits or whatever it might be. Where do I start when it comes to being real about what I'm assessing or observing with my child? Where do I start?
and you have to start with the problem.
Okay, what if you don't see the problem?
Well, if you don't see there's a problem, you probably wouldn't be stepping up for better parenting.
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing perfectly fine. I've had that experience where they were destroying the child's psyche, but you'll never convince them they need to change a thing. And I want to add in here at the moment, how do we challenge the parent to be interested in stepping up for better parenting? And some good parenting is fun and easy. And it is. We get too serious. And again, that keeps the parent down it takes care of the survival conflict and the stress conflict, which trumps thinking and monitoring. And it gets you into that love, heart, what we call the limbic system, which is the mortar between the bricks, according to the children here.
Isn't that when, I just had a 1-week vacation with my both kids, and we played, we did a lot of stuff, and we did it all together, and the place we stayed was like 600 square feet with no TV, and it was like we were at, at the
Wasn't
beach.
That perfect?
Oh, and what happens is when you talk about like being clear about what you're observing, is you're in the sandpit with the kid.
Yeah,
So
you're in the
moment. You see how
moment.
they're moving, you see how well grounded they are or aren't, you see how they communicate. And I think that's probably the biggest place to start, is be in the moment.
Yes. Be here now.
Be here now. That's because you can't observe if you're not here, right?
Yeah.
If you're, if you're texting or if you're online or if you're still working, whatever you might be doing, if you're not present, you can't observe.
Talk about the be here now. That could apply to this seminar, because one of the things I want to make sure we get in is the reason you're good at what you do is you've never stopped learning. You've acquired knowledge, you've acquired experience, and you have expertise. Knowledge, experience, and expertise. The problem with parenting is your experience is in the here and now, and there's no book, there's no blueprint. And the knowledge is you're overwhelmed. I have to change 5 foods he's eating and he won't bite on a thing anymore, that kind of thing. You have to give them permission to be lost. But their job is to keep learning, lifelong learning as a parent and a mother, even after they leave home. And a father.
Right, absolutely right. Yeah, and constant. You have to be valuable.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes being valuable is being quiet.
Good point.
Because when we're quiet, we're giving a better message about, I know you can figure this out for yourself. And the other thing is give them a chance to fail. You learn by failure.
Right.
Mistakes are fine. The mistake is when we don't learn from our mistakes. You have to say, well, what lesson is this? And the child can learn to model that behavior when he sees it. You make a mistake. You don't beat yourself up. You say, it's like in bridge, they mess up a hand. I always say, well, that was a learning hand. And you can just say, well, that was a learning lesson.
They used to say to me, life is a rough draft.
Yes. And I said to Jolie a couple of years back, maybe 4, she was asking about something, and I said, I really believe we keep getting the lessons we need until we learn them. Then we move forward. If we're stuck on something, we're not getting the lesson.
Well, that's psychology 101, right? If you don't deal with it, it'll always come back in a different form.
Yeah. And that's why getting a divorce isn't usually a solution, because you don't know why the marriage didn't work.
Right,
and you just keep repeating yourself in another marriage.
That's a whole topic for a different day, right?
Yeah, but I think the main thing for the parent, when I'm starting someone in bridge and they're terrified, or if parents are stuck, I can't make them behave, is, behavior is fun and easy. I mean, look at what I did with that curmudgeon kid. I played him along, but I let him express himself, and I let him buy into it and him make the decision. He didn't have to come. He didn't like classical music.
Let me ask you this question. So a lot of times one of the biggest behavior issues with younger kids is attention seeking, right? So
they got to have it like they got to have water.
I mean, isn't attention seeking basically saying, be here with me now, parent, mom, dad, be with me now?
And you have to, again, when you're taking your inventory, when my child connects to me, what's the antecedent? Is it him doing his jobs and I'm complimenting him? Him doing his jobs without me nudging him? Or is it I never notice him till he's naughty? Mm-hmm. So then I give him naughty attention, but he got his attention, so he's in charge. And we've reinforced bad behavior. So you've got to leave out what you don't want and notice what you do want.
Right.
Yeah. You have to be patient about that, and they need to know what the rules are. Remember when we taught timeouts? The reason that timeouts worked in our discipline process at the Learning Center was we showed them what a good timeout was and what a good timeout wasn't. Am I doing a good timeout now? Am I doing a good timeout now? You know, am I up and down and not sitting in my place thinking? This kind of thing. And I remember when we had that training, he was adamant about that. If you want them to learn something, you have to show them what it is and what it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And you could take them to the store and say, let's see who can find 20 healthy foods first. And the rule is they can't have over 10 grams of sugar. And they'll go around reading the labels and okay, I got one, and you write it down on your back of your grocery list or whatever. But
well, it's interesting, you know, because when I said to you, almost every day when I'm with my kids, I make up these games, right?
Uh-huh.
So, you know, the other day it was, I think last night they were playing Can You Do This? So my daughter has this thing where she can listen one arm down and make the other one down.
Uh-huh.
And then there's the three of us were sitting there, and I said, can you wiggle your ears? And then we just kind of went around and just kind of, and it turns out that we call them talents, things that one of us could do this, another one couldn't do. But the whole time when you're playing these silly little games, is you're present with each other.
You're connected.
You're connected. You're actually observing and kind of being part of their childhood.
Right.
And there's no distractors. So
right.
It's funny. I'm hearing kind of a theme here. Like, not only is it be here now, it's also about mindfulness, and it's also about what you and I always talk about: peace and calm. Right. So you got to get out of fight or flight. And
criticizing, even when we're playing bridge, if you criticize your partner, their game goes down. If you find something to optimize, boy, you sure play those hands well. I wish I could be that good at that. And I have somebody that got her Gold Life Masters because I told her to stop criticizing and start noticing what he's doing right and tell him. She called me up excited and said, damn, I did what you told me to and it worked.
It's funny because I think criticism kind of comes from a place, a lot of times it comes from impatience.
It comes from learning models. Mm-hmm. You'll find that most people that are critical were criticized when they were children. Had critical parents.
Right. Yeah, and we're going to talk about behavior as a whole different component.
Yeah.
But and where all that stems from. But
as a parent, you can teach the parent the words to say. Your best is good enough. And help them keep track of how much they're improving. Last week you got 16 spelling words. This week you got 17. That's cool. I was hoping you'd get 15 and you got 17. Wow.
They light up.
Oh, they do. And then they work harder on their spelling. Rather than the tone of voice that, and I always hated that they put check marks on their spelling test, wrong. And what I do is when they get them right, I check them like they would be missed. And I just count the check boxes right. And I let the kids see me do it.
Right. And it's,
yeah.
Well, you have a great plan for the behavior, the game that, with the casino chips and all that good stuff. And it's always
behavior's easy because if we were walking in their shoes, we'd be behaving exactly the same way. And the bottom line is, we can make the difference. The parent makes the difference.
At this phase of the game, it is about walking in their shoes in order to understand and observe and kind of be, so to kind of summarize our whole concept here, it's in order to be here now, or, you have to be here now, you have to be mindful, you have to be in the moment in order to observe not just the negative, but the positive, and to kind of be integrate the whole family.
Right.
And that's the place you start.
And you ought to add in here, too, that when they did studies on the SATs and how they affected college success, there was absolutely no correlation between high scores on the SAT and college success, and happiness, for that matter. The one item that was consistent through college success were children that had dinner in the dining room table with the family.
Mm. Yeah,
and that's what you were saying about your trip. No television, play silly games together. And I remember Paul when he was 14 or so, I remember Paul saying, well, of course, I told him about this statistic. And he says, well, of course, that's where I learned to think. And they also learn listening because Finn's going to have something to say, and then Mia's going to say, but what about this? And then you have this little discussion. Your favorite one is sex.
And you're there, and you start to realize that time has gone by. Your kids have this this vocabulary maybe you didn't realize.
Yeah.
And you're looking at each other. And I think
they learn taking turns. They learn showing respect for what the other person
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Sound
Foundations
for Parenting podcast with your hosts, Darren and Brian. Find them on social media
and they're acknowledged
Sound Foundations for Parenting. And if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave a review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time on the Sound Foundations for Parenting podcast.
Next week we're going to talk about feet, heart, head, or the triune brain.